Hi, my name is Raisa Islam, and I am representing VA We Love You. And we are here today with Dr. Nila Devanath, who is running for Congress in Virginia's District 2. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much, Raisa, for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. And yes, I'm Dr. Nila Devanath, and I'm running for the 2nd Congressional District.
Awesome. So, for the people who are just meeting you, who is Nila Devanath beyond the campaign?
Oh, that is a wonderful question. You know, it seems like the campaign has taken over my whole life for the past year, but I am just a Hampton Roads resident. You know, my parents came here 40 years ago from Bangladesh. They immigrated here, so I'm a very proud daughter of immigrants and our community. And I have lived here in Hampton Roads pretty much since I was 6 months old. So I'm a member of the community. I'm a doctor here. I love what I do, taking care of my patients, and I am a brand new mom. So I just became a mom 2 months ago. It's been amazing journey, and yeah, I'm just a resident here. I'm just a constituent.
Yeah, so you're a person of the people.
Yes.
You're also a doctor, a lawyer, a mother, and now a congressional candidate. So what made this moment the moment to run for Congress?
I think probably what initially, got me started was my patients. So I'm an acute care hospital doctor, and what I have been seeing in the hospitals is pretty atrocious. It's horrific. It shouldn't be happening. People are not getting the care that they need, particularly our veterans. So, even though I'm in a community hospital, pretty much every other patient that I see is a veteran or active duty. And the most common patient is a veteran, a senior veteran who tried to go to the VA because they, were diabetic, they had a foot infection, and they needed it to be taken care of. But they were not able to get an appointment for 6 to 9 months. So what happens? That infection spreads up the leg, they get sepsis, they end up in the hospital, and then I'm seeing them in the emergency room, right? And, here I am calling a surgeon. Today we have to cut off a toe. The next week we have to cut off a foot. And every couple of months I'm calling a surgeon to cut off a leg. And to me, that is practicing wartime medicine, right? Why am I practicing wartime medicine in a time that's supposed to be peace and prosperity? And then, on top of that, Jen Kagans, our current congressional representative, voted for the big, beautiful bill, which many, including myself, call the big, ugly bill. That was last year. And what does that bill do? It cuts health care. It actually has cuts to Medicaid, which 50% of our veterans in this community actually switch to Medicaid because the VA is so stressed, they want to have more options in the community. But now their health care, Medicaid, that they switch to is getting cut. Also, our insurance premium went up. So some people can't even afford the insurance premium, so they go without health care. And it just made me so incredibly enraged, really, because for somebody who is a veteran herself, who is a healthcare worker, she's a nurse practitioner. So it's not that she doesn't know what patients are going through. She actually intimately knows what patients are going through. And she still voted for that bill to take away healthcare. Why would she do that? I don't know either. So I said to myself, you know what? You're right. I used to be an attorney about 10 years ago, and I have worked on national federal policy, and I said, might as well brush this off, this law degree that I'm not using, fill out the paperwork, and I started running for Congress. That was just the beginning of things, Along this year, so many things have happened, right? ICE has come into our communities. They're proposing data centers. The wind turbine clean energy project got essentially just taken away by Trump, and we've seen all of those windmills come in. Our own troops here have been deployed in an unnecessary war. All of this happened within the last year. So that was just the beginning, and things have just gotten worse. And so I'm so glad that I'm running to be a new voice and a different perspective that is actually going to meet people where they are right now.
Right. Yeah, it is really refreshing to have somebody who is willing to talk about the things that are difficult and, not shy away or pause when things are controversial.
Yep.
So thank you for making this run for all of us, really.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Raisa. I really appreciate that. It has it has been an uphill battle. There are a lot of establishment politics that are going on right now, and I think voices of people who are running just from the community are really suppressed, right? It's career politicians who, are putting their thumbs on the scale and trying to essentially suppress community member voices.
Right. So, speaking of, you are running to become the first person of color to represent Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. What does this mean to you personally, and what message do you hope it sends to young people watching?
Yeah. That is an awesome question, Raisa. Thank you so much for asking that. And for me, being the first person of color to represent this district in 237 years would be groundbreaking, right? It would make history. And what I wanted to show our young people is that don't let anybody stop you. You can do anything. And also, our voices matter, right? There needs to be more Black and brown leadership in Congress. Right now, there isn't. And what did we have we seen, right? The Voting Rights Act has been gutted. There are majority districts that have been redistricted in Republican states so that those folks are losing their seats. We tried to fight back in Virginia. That got thrown out by the courts, right? And actually, Jen Kiggins, our congressman of this district, she agreed with racist remarks on public radio. That was just 2 weeks ago, or like last month, So it's time for new leadership. We need to have perspectives that have never been represented before, and I hope this inspires everyone to just keep believing in themselves and know that they matter.
I think that's, the fairest point to make. From my own experience, I was on the Arts and Humanities Commission of Virginia Beach, and I realized that if I wasn't in those rooms for those decisions being made, there are a lot of perspectives and decisions that would have been made without anybody being considered, except for the people who were in that room. So it's nice to be able to, have somebody who you agree with, who, can speak for you, even if you don't have a voice yourself. There's somebody considering you that can help along the way.
Yes, absolutely. And also, thank you for being there as that voice, because you're right, like so many populations, and we have a very diverse district. Hampton Roads itself, which, is included in District 2, 3, and 1, incredibly diverse. And we need more people to just, put themselves out there and not be shy to represent. And it's not that people are shy. Sometimes, again, it's like this establishment where voices of minority representation are often not considered. And it shouldn't be that way.
Yeah, there's, all of us have our own lifestyles and issues that come with that. And, there are a lot of problems that aren't considered because they aren't experienced. So, the more that we can have people like you representing, I think we can find out more about our community.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. What I say is, let's not repeat history. Let's make history.
Speaking of making history, so we're going to talk about why this race matters in the state of the district. So what do you think the biggest challenges facing families in Virginia Beach and across District 2 are right now?
So the biggest challenges are affordability and healthcare. Those are really the two big ones. And also, particularly for our troops, is staying out of unnecessary wars, right? Putting their lives at risk. So I'll kind of touch on each one of those. For affordability, there is a huge issue with the housing stock in Hampton Roads. There is not enough affordable housing. This is nationally as well, but particularly here, we do have some transient populations that, need housing and need it to be affordable. We have issues with our grocery bills and our utilities. And then one of the biggest drivers of cost is actually healthcare. That is my expertise. That is what I see most prominently is people are, not able to afford prescriptions. People are getting bills from the hospital if they're uninsured that are tens of thousands of dollars. Some people are actually going bankrupt because of medical bills, because of this insurance crisis. And also not being able to access care means you get sicker, and instead of going to your primary care, you end up in the emergency room. Our emergency rooms are full. My job right now in the community hospitals is I'm a backup doctor, which means that when the hospitals are understaffed, then they can call me and I can come and, work for them and take care of the patients. Tell me why every month for the last several years, I have had more than enough shifts to fulfill a full-time job. Sometimes they're asking me to do 20 or, 25 shifts in a month. Those are 16-hour shifts. They're completely understaffed. And the hospitals keep getting more and more sick patients. So what I see across Hampton Roads is really a lack of healthcare options for people, timely and affordable healthcare, good coverage, and just affordability issues in general. And the third piece is about our military population here, our veterans and our active duty. Veterans are also not experiencing the best with healthcare. We did open up a new VA center in Chesapeake. Great fancy building, understaffed. So there's not even enough people to work in the building. So some people ask, well, why did they do that? It's unclear, right? If you don't have the staff to fill it, it's not going to be helpful just being a nice fancy building. And for our active duty members, we're in a war with Iran. A lot of folks just came back recently, but that was a deployment where we didn't know what was going to happen. We still don't know what's going to happen. Why are we in this war? Right? It's unclear why we're in this war. And I would never vote to send our troops into battle to potentially lose their lives for something that we're not even sure why we're there.
So it sounds like it's pretty clear that you care more about the people than, what it might look like to the outside world.
100%. I deal with life and death, right? I work in the emergency room. I work in the ICU. I work on the hospital wards. So I really see people at their worst moments, and it's a privilege and it's an honor to serve them. But real people is who I deal with, every single person that comes in the door. And to know that our government isn't really working for them is what upsets me. And that's one of the reasons why I started running.
Okay, so Hampton Roads has a unique identity because of the military presence, tourism economy, higher educational systems, and the growing diversity. How do you think this region is changing politically and culturally?
That's a great question. I think politically, it's a region that, traditionally District 2 has been a Republican district. But over, the last couple of decades, it's been slowly shifting to a more Democratic or liberal leaning or left leaning district. And right now, it's pretty much in the middle. It's a very purple district. I think most families have in their family somebody who is a Republican and somebody who is a Democrat. It's just a very purple place. And what that really tells me is that there's more people in the middle, like shifting to the middle from the right. And also, I think just generally this administration and all of the poor choices that they're making for the American people and for Hampton Roads and for District 2, it's showing, right? And that's why people are really moving more towards the left.
I personally think, yeah, it is kind of refreshing that people are meeting more in the middle, because there are a lot of perspectives that aren't considered on both sides. So, that's why it is important to have new, refreshing candidates who can kind of not only represent what they already represent, but also stick around to listen to, the issues of every kind. So how do you plan on meeting in the middle?
So it's kind of just like my practice, right? So as a doctor who works in a public-facing institution, I can't choose who I treat. It's not a private practice. It's not, I didn't become a plastic surgeon who's an aesthetic plastic surgeon, right? Nothing like that. I chose to be an acute care specialist. I chose to be a hospital doctor. And when that happens, it doesn't matter, if you're black, white, brown. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, independent, nothing. It doesn't matter what religion you are. I have to treat you with the utmost respect. I have to understand you and really get into why are you here, what is going on in your life. Again, it's an amazing privilege. But what that has done is I may disagree with somebody on some issue or, politically or this and that, but I'm always here to listen, and I'm always here to learn too. I just want to discuss why do you believe what you believe, right? My experience, probably the most telling is COVID. I came back to Hampton Roads from all my schooling and training up north to help people here because I knew this district, right? A little bit more conservative leaning at the time, and I knew vaccinations would be an issue. When I was training up north, most people got the vaccine. But knowing kind of, where I grew up, it's Suffolk, I knew there was going to be a big influence and people wouldn't get it. And unfortunately, I was right. I wish that I was wrong, but I'm glad that I was here to help people. But there were also some people that we couldn't help. I don't know if I ever told you this story, Raisa, but, there was a patient that I had at OBC he was a 32-year-old guy, young guy, white gentleman. He didn't really have anything else going on, healthy otherwise, but he got COVID and he decided not to take the shot because, he was hearing these messages from DC, like, oh, vaccines are bad, whatever. So he decided not to get it. And I was one of the last people to take care of him in the ICU. He was there for 7 days and he died. And his dad came in the next day wearing a bright yellow t-shirt that said the only virus is the media. Imagine that. You're wearing a shirt that is mocking the existence of COVID, and your son has died of COVID. You're over his dead body. Like it was so jarring, right? And that told me that people in DC right now don't care, right? There are folks who are not making the right decisions. I'm not talking about everybody, but this current administration, right? And we need somebody who sees this on the ground and has the experience working with people to fight for people on all sides and just listen to them, right? I know that was a little bit going into, another realm. I don't know if that answered your question directly, but I did want to share that.
Well, I mean, we are here to
Yeah.
learn about everything and, know what you're really about. So you have described your issues with the current state of, the healthcare system and, what are ways that we could improve it? And, what are some solutions that, especially for veterans, that we can help with even mental health and, for the general population?
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So I think one of the best solutions right now to our healthcare crisis is universal healthcare, is an option like Medicare for all. Now, a lot of people will say, oh, well, you can't do Medicare for all. It's too expensive, this and that. First of all, if we actually have the willpower to take on the corporations and take on the billionaires by taxing them, we will have enough money for universal health care, education, childcare, right? We can actually fully fund domestic programs if we actually tax the people who are benefiting off of working families, right? Medicare for all is not going to happen overnight. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of very strong lobbies from insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies that will try their best to make sure that doesn't happen. But why would it be the solution for all of us, right? Right now we have a piecemeal healthcare system. If you're over 65, you get this. If you're under 65, you get that. If you're a veteran, you get this. If you're a child, you get that, right? Because it's all piecemeal, there's a lot of cracks. People fall through the cracks. That's when they don't have insurance, and that's when they can't afford their prescription drugs. If you have Medicare for all, it gives you a government option that's going to be available everywhere. What does that do? Private insurance companies will have to compete with this government option. What is that going to do? It's going to bring their prices down because they'll be forced to. That is going to be beneficial for everyone because at least they'll have, the basic insurance plan, this government option. And if they want to do private, they can, but those prices will be lower too. So that is what I would be pushing. It's going to take, 10, 20 years for that to happen, but you have to start somewhere. And if we don't have people in Congress who are willing to start the process, we're actually never going to get there.
I totally agree. And I think, part of what is going on currently with career politicians is that they're not necessarily creating new systems. They are working with what's already there. Yeah. And, there is so much power in being able to set the tone for everyone else. I don't think that career politicians, but people who are really just trying to be agreeable and do what they want.
Yep.
I don't think that they're really considering how they can actually help instead of falling into a system that already exists.
Right. And, there is an argument, because people will say, oh, well, we need to just do incremental change. We have been doing incremental change for decades. Mm-hmm. And this is where we got to. Right now is the time for bold moves, bold decisions, and bold opinions, right? We can't just keep waiting to inch forward. We need to take a leap.
Right. So, moving forward, how can Congress better support working families with childcare, paid leave, rising housing costs, student debt?
Yes.
All of it.
I am so glad you asked that question because I actually, I'm a doctor. I was a lawyer for domestic violence survivors 10 years ago, but those two areas of knowledge really didn't necessarily answer the question that I had too, which is how can I help working families right now, right? If I was in Congress tomorrow, what could I do? So as a working mom myself, when my baby was 1 month old, probably not as advised, but I did travel with him and my husband up to DC. I wanted to educate myself, right? I'm a student. I'm a lifelong student. And I went to conferences, I met senators and congresspeople who are all working on different pieces of legislation. And what I found is a piece of legislation that I want to throw my weight behind, which is called the Working Americans Tax Cut Act. So it's currently in the House and Senate. It needs more support, but this is an act, a piece of legislation that would give us immediate relief. So for anybody who is at the living wage in the U.S. on average, which is about $45,000 to $50,000, there would be no federal income tax. That's huge because that's meeting people where they are right now. There are other proposals, like for instance, Bernie Sanders wants to tax billionaires. Elizabeth Warren has a piece of legislation that she has sponsored that is taxing not just billionaires, but also multimillionaires. And those are great because they tax people who are, and corporations who are benefiting off of working families. But that's going to take time to build up that revenue source. So it's not going to be immediate. That's going to take like a couple of years, maybe even a decade. What about the working families right now? This piece of legislation, the Working Americans Tax Cut Act, actually flows really nicely together with those because it gives you immediate relief while this revenue stream is being built up to then fund domestic programs like universal health care, universal child care, and education. So it's a little bit of a combo there.
Right. So I guess that really kind of covers the basis of, the issues of our general, Virginia population. I think it's great that you kind of have considered, all of the different kinds of lifestyles and, the issues that aren't thought of. Moving forward, we are going to talk about, the things that people don't really think about, which is the creative community, which is something that I'm personally a part of. And maybe, all of these issues aren't relevant to everyone, but it is nice to know that somebody is thinking of them. So this is going to be my personal moment to ask these questions.
Of course.
So Virginia Beach has an incredible creative community of artists, musicians, performers, filmmakers, photographers, designers, and all of the above. Why do you think supporting the arts matters politically and economically?
So politically, let's say just politically, economically, and socially, I think a lot of times people think like art is like a luxury, right? Art and music is like something that it's just, it's an added thing. I don't believe that. I think art is like at the root of humanity, right? It is the way that we express ourselves. It's the way that we interact with each other in our communities and in the world. We need art to be human. So for me, supporting artists is supporting humanity, right? Supporting the way that we can connect with each other and actually harmonize instead of attacking each other, right? It's something that brings people together instead of divides. I mean, you could go to a concert and there's lots of different people there, right? You can go to a museum and enjoy art and there's lots of different people there. Art is something that binds us together. It is like the antidote to the division that we're seeing today.
Right. Because there are artists of every kind, from every range of the political spectrum. I've worked in the industry for over 10 years now, and I've also just been a well-trained artist since I was about 5 years old. So, like it is an ever-changing community, but what's been really nice is seeing the importance of our creative culture being highlighted more and more every year. So I think it's really great, when there's somebody who is inside of, the political rooms that we need to represent us. So what are some solutions that you can find for artists that, what are the benefits of public investment in the arts?
It's huge. It's huge. I think so. Public investment in the arts creates a safer environment for folks. It creates a more free environment. If there's a place where people can gather, right, to create art or celebrate art, it's going to bring the community closer together. When a community is closer together, there's less infighting, there's less division, there's less safety issues. I mean, honestly, in places where people can freely express themselves and come together over and over again to celebrate music and art, it just helps the community thrive, right? It creates an environment where people actually want to be instead of, leaving Hampton Roads, right? I think having artists here makes this an incredibly attractive area to live. And, people want to be around what's new and creative and what's fun and really thoughtful and introspective. It gives life to this region. So
I agree. I mean, I think there was a time when, especially the government, was afraid of what art would bring to communities and, associate graffiti with violence or crime, or even DJ events would be shut down because of what the government was afraid of, but not really what was going on. These events are created to unify people, and if we always feel like we're not included, then we aren't.
Right. And just speaking on like unifying people, right? Everyone needs an outlet. Whatever is going on, we need some place to speak it into existence, right? Or speak it into the air and just express it. Art allows us to do that, right? And so if you invest in this outlet of expression, people can come together because they want to be heard, right? And they can actually feel like, hey, I'm doing something, I'm expressing myself, my voice matters, right? We have town halls, we have city council, and we have a lot of forums, but art is another forum that allows us to do that. And the government should invest in it. Right now this administration has taken away, as we know, funding from the National Endowment for the Arts and Humanities. That's terrible for the country, right? We need to invest in artists because they uplift all of us. And if we're just taking that away, and where's that money going? It's going into the war. Why are we taking something of beauty and, collectivism and supporting each other in what we're doing and throwing it into something that's divisive and causing death and destruction?
Right. No, art is a solution of, making communities more peaceful and, really grounding people to feel like they're a part of something. And I really feel like because of the way that the government has shown artists that, they don't matter in the past, a lot of artists don't trust the word government or politician even. Yep. Why is it important that creatives do get involved in politics?
I think every creative should get involved in politics, because if you don't, the system still exists whether you participate in it or not, right? We have this establishment. We don't want the establishment, but how do we fight against it? You can't just sit out. There's a lot of people who say, oh, well, I don't have the best choices to vote for, so I'm not going to vote. No, oh my goodness. Do you know why Trump is in office? It's because the vast majority of people in this country did not vote. They didn't like the options, so they didn't make a choice. If you don't have the right choice, hey, run yourself, right? I'm running for Congress. You can too. I encourage everyone to run for Congress. But don't sit out, right? Make a choice. Even if it's a hard choice, still make a choice. Every creative should participate, because if you don't, you are letting the world run you instead of running the world.
That's the point.
Yeah.
No. I think, we do need somebody who will consider, everything and everyone before they make a decision. So
100%.
we will circle back to, more general conversations about, I guess, like different sectors of the community. So like, there are lots of different people going through different issues. So there's homelessness, there are people incarcerated who are trying to make it back to life and everything.
100%.
Let's circle back and kind of get into those points. So let me see.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can, you mentioned incarcerated folks getting back into the community.
Mm-hmm.
So this is actually a really, really important issue right now in Virginia. So for those of you who don't know, there is going to be an amendment on the ballot in November for Virginia's Constitution that will allow a restoration of voting rights for people coming back into the community. Right now, if you have a felony and you do your time and you're integrating back into the community, it doesn't matter. You can't vote. And that's not fair, because if people have, served their sentence and they're coming back into the community, they should be able to participate. And they should also have an incentive to participate, right? If your right to vote has been taken away and you're coming back into the community, but you can't vote for anything in the community, why would you care, right? It's almost like, oh, well, my voice doesn't matter, so I actually care less about the community, so maybe I'll go back and do whatever I was, And so we want people to be invested. We want people to have their rights back, because, people just deserve to vote, right? They deserve their rights.
They deserve to matter.
Everybody deserves to matter.
Yeah.
Every single person matters, right? And we want to give human dignity back to people, and taking away somebody's right to vote is taking away their dignity. So please check out the ballot in November. It'll be on the ballot with all of the congressional candidates and everybody else for the midterms, but it's going to be really important that we push for that amendment this November in Virginia.
Right. Yeah, no, speaking of incarcerated individuals, it is really kind of wild that, part of, making mistakes and, getting in there in the first place, they are already going into the system of having to fix, their wrongs. And like you said, doing time. They already did their time. So it's kind of wild to be a part of a system that, is controlling you, that you can't really come back from. Like a lot of felons can't even get jobs because of, what they may have done before. And
there needs to be like regulations on that. So right now there's not too many regulations. If you have a felony, there's so many jobs that can just explicitly cut you out, even if it's not something that like matters in that way. Like, you might work in retail or maybe you're at, I don't know, Office Max and you're printing stuff. What does that have to do with whatever happened in your past?
Right. And it doesn't. Yeah. And like not necessarily, every felony isn't weighed the exact same, True. And I think also that, being basically it's like a blanket way to cut people off from society. Yes. And if you are really trying to reform a community, there has to be easier ways to get back into it. So how would you help with that?
Yeah. Well, and I want to make a point before I go into the solution there, is that this particularly, again, affects communities of color. Mm-hmm. We know that Black men in our country and in our state have been charged more frequently with crimes regarding drugs or even marijuana, which, by the way, is essentially legalized here in Virginia, and have gone to jail for it. That is affecting a huge community that when they come back out, they're getting cut off from jobs, their voting rights are not being restored, And people can say, oh, well, but it's just the people. No. There are people who have been targeted, communities of color have been targeted more frequently for these types of crimes than other communities. And that's just, if you look at history and statistics, you will find that. And so it's almost like it's a sneaky way to suppress the vote of people of color. The solution to that is making sure we have regulations on, the type of job. And you're right, every crime and every felony or whatever is not the same. But there are certain jobs you don't need to know. That information isn't important, right? And, it's kind of like you shouldn't ask. You shouldn't be able to discriminate against somebody because of their past. So there do need to be regulations on that. And then in terms of getting people integrated into the community, that's where I go back to art, right? Art in the community is an amazing way to help heal and to just be a part of the community. So there are a lot of programs actually for people who are coming out and for people who are still incarcerated with art and letting folks express themselves that help with their mental health, that help them just get through the things that are going on in their head, right? It makes them better members of society, when you come out, because you actually are participating and you're expressing yourself. We do need to have more training programs, reintegration programs for anybody who's coming out, and it needs to be multi-focused. It has to be housing, healthcare, and particularly mental health care, and jobs. So if we can have more groups actually focusing on creating a support system, then folks who are coming out of being incarcerated will actually be able to integrate into the community much faster.
Right.
But right now, it's very piecemeal. Maybe they'll get some housing support, but they won't get the health care or the mental health care. Maybe they might get a job, but they might not have housing, right? So unless we have those three pieces of the pie together, we're still doing people a disservice.
Right. So, yeah, a lot of people do end up homeless because of, the resources are not available or they are not supported by their communities or, the place that incarcerated them in the first place.
Yeah.
So, on that note, between people who are, getting out or even veterans or people with mental health issues or drug addiction, people who fall into, not having a stable place to live.
Yes.
What are some ways that we can heal that in the community and solutions that we can find for people who do want another chance?
Yeah. Well, from a federal level, there is something called the low-income housing tax credit, and we've had that for a long time, but we haven't poured enough funding into that tax credit. That would be an immediate relief to people looking for affordable housing options. What that does is it incentivizes businesses to create more affordable housing. But if we don't have that incentive, or if we're not really putting funding towards that, then what incentive do businesses and developers have to build affordable housing?
So
right?
that would be more towards like the landlords who are creating the numbers
Yes.
for the people to live in. So, I mean, that is a solution for sure. I think, why would a landlord take less money than what the state
Right.
says a place is worth?
It's in some ways it's not necessarily the best solution, right? But we have to be real with like what's going on with our housing stock. We have you can go anywhere in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake and Suffolk now, right? You can see these giant buildings with like brand new condos and all these like row homes and townhouses that are being built. And then you look at the price and you're like, who's coming here? Who's living in these houses, right? And then we have people who are on the street, pushing a shopping cart. And it's like, how are we building all of this brand new, very expensive housing, and we don't have housing that's affordable to just regular community members, right? That's a huge problem. So is the tax credit going to the developers who are doing that? Technically, yes. But we need to incentivize, private and public to create more affordable housing, and that's one of those options.
Right. So, these have all been issues for as long as time has existed.
Yep.
And there has been leadership in the past who, they've tried to come in and make some changes in our government. I know that Elaine Luria has actually run for this position before, and what I experienced was that not much changed from her congressional run and her actual, her time being in there. Why is it important that we have a new voice in that position?
Well, I think it's incredibly important because, again, it's about that lived experience, right? There were not very many changes made for working families during her time in Congress, as you mentioned. I am not a millionaire. I am not a multimillionaire, but Elaine Luria is. And she has been. And she actually doubled her net worth while she was in Congress for even just a few years. That's one of the biggest differences between, my positions and hers is that, I believe that corporations and billionaires should not be controlling society for the rest of us.
Especially if they're not going to do anything about it.
Exactly. And I don't accept any corporate donations on my campaign. I don't accept the billionaire corporations. I don't accept any money from AIPAC or foreign interests.
Wait, before we move forward, what exactly does that mean?
Okay, so to get into it a little bit, so there are things called political action committees, and not all of them are created equal. Sometimes unions might create a political action committee, or there might be some leadership groups. But the political action committees are basically groups of people or corporations or companies that can give unlimited amounts of money to a candidate. How does that happen? There was a case in the Supreme Court called it was called Citizens United. And essentially what that said is that if you are a corporation, you can give, unlimited amounts through these PACs. What that did is it created a whole host of issues with politicians accepting, millions of dollars from these corporations to run their campaigns. Now, if you accept millions of dollars from someone, you're probably going to decide things in their favor, right? People can say, "Oh no, I'll take the money, but I won't be influenced." BS. Okay, BS, because a little bit over 15 years ago, doctors were in the same position, right? Pharmaceutical companies were taking doctors out to fancy dinners and hotels and free tickets to amusement parks and stuff like that. Today, doctors can't do that. Why? Is because they looked at a study and they said, okay, they're getting all of this money and these perks from these pharmaceutical companies. Does it change the way that they make decisions when they treat patients? The answer is yes. So if a doctor is influenced, do you think other people are going to be influenced? Your regular average politician in DC? Absolutely. That is the problem. And that is why corporations have this hand in what's going on in DC. It's dark money in politics, right? They're giving and giving and giving, and then politicians are making certain choices that are beneficial to the corporations and not to working families, right? For instance, there was legislation in Congress that would have banned individual stock trading in Congress, basically banning insider trading. But do you know who did not support that? Elaine Luria. She said that banning individual stock trading in Congress was, and she actually said this in public also, she said it was BS. She also, like I said, doubled her net worth as a multimillionaire while in Congress. She also has about $4 million in Facebook, right? She didn't want to vote for it because there was a benefit to her. But if you think about the bigger picture, voting to ban stock trading in Congress would be huge, because then these politicians don't have an incentive to, to get into the office just to make millions and then leave.
Right. I mean, there should at least be a cap to it, because that system only benefits the people who are smart enough to use it.
Right.
So, or clever enough, I should say, not even smart.
Yeah.
Like, I think that, there shouldn't be any kind of, mixing of the two. Insider trading is already the issue.
Right. Insider trading is the issue. And it's because that our congressional, all these representatives in D.C., they get extra information, right, from companies or deals or other things going on that we, as citizens, are not privy to. When they find that information, they can go to their stocks, make a quick trade, and then, basically gain millions. And that's not fair, because that information is not available to the rest of us, right? Ban on individual stock trading in Congress just makes sense. It just makes sense. It's an end to corruption. There's a couple of other differences, right? I said I don't accept any corporate PAC money. However, that is not shared by my opponent in the primary. She has accepted corporate PAC donations. There's another difference, which, I think you were alluding to earlier, which is that I don't accept AIPAC money. So AIPAC is a political action committee that is involved in influence from Israel and kind of their position on the war, right? I don't think that the U.S. should be fighting a war for another country, and we don't exactly know, what is the reason that we're doing it, right? We are currently in this war, and we shouldn't be. We shouldn't be. It's driving up our gas prices. It's putting our service members at risk unnecessarily. And also, there's the issue of Palestine, right? There is a genocide going on in Palestine that has been going on. Tens of thousands of children and women they are no longer on the face of the earth. When people see the pictures or the videos of what's going on there, or people who've actually been there, I know some folks who've actually been there, and how are we standing and fighting a war for, a country who is causing genocide right now? I don't know how that's happening, and that's one of my, I guess, biggest differences is I don't support this war in Iran. I don't support any further additional military funding to those war efforts. I do believe there is a genocide going on in Palestine, and I think we need to do something to stop it instead of supporting folks who are committing genocide.
I really appreciate you taking the time to speak to us about this, because many of these politicians are having to bite their tongue because of the money they're accepting. And I appreciate the fact that you will not, and you are somebody who can speak for people who cannot speak. So
Absolutely.
In our closing remarks, despite how divided politics may feel, what gives you the most hope right now in the community?
I think what I have experienced, and I've, again, lived here for almost 40 years, right? Been here pretty much my whole life. I never really knew about the political scene in Hampton Roads. But what gives me hope is every single community member that I've met over the past year, to see the work that they're doing, right? Because people are not waiting for a politician to get into office, right? Like, I wasn't waiting to do public service, right? People are coming together, they're finding their own solutions, and, you know, whether that's volunteering at the food bank or creating your own nonprofit to supply coats to folks who don't have it, or doing your own fundraising or drives, or, you know, just working in the community, building houses, right? Building affordable housing. People are not waiting. And that is what I love, right? People are excited to be the solution instead of complaining and just being upset. There's a bunch of people who are working very, very hard in this community every day for each other. So that gives me hope.
I think that's really great. And for anyone at home who wants to get involved, how can they?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would love to have you on Team Nila. We have a lot of volunteer opportunities. You can check out our website. It's nilaforcongress.com. So that's NILAFOR Congress.com. And yeah, join our team. Come help us door knock. Come help us make some phone calls or write some postcards. Come help us just be in the community. We'd love to have you, and thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And every action makes a difference, so please be a part of it. And yeah, I can't wait to see what's next.
Thanks, Raisa.
Thank you. Right.